Hey folks, MasakoX here. It's over. Ah yes, after about 20 months or so, the Granolah the Survivor Arc is finally over. Not only that, but we've got a few months before the next saga begins to stew over this particular passage, so let's do it. And come on, Toyotaro, you introducing that character right at the end, you know that we're going to be talking about this for months. This is going to keep the hype up, even though there's no manga. Oh, you cheeky little devil, you. But with the entire Granolah story now laid out before us, we can discuss it as a whole product and story. I am fully aware that me reviewing individual chapters like I did is not the best way to go about things, all because things change, but sometimes it is good to get an initial reaction. Also, let me know if you've liked the last few review formats and how I changed up said review process. Leave a comment with your thoughts, which do you prefer? But today though, we can talk about the good, the bad, and the weird that was the Cerellian story, and now remaining legacy. Is it a bad saga, as many would like to claim? Was it a waste of time and somewhat dragged down the super story entirely? Is it still kinda good, as Haverok and I claimed at the beginning? What worked and what didn't? Did the ending save it, or did it do quite the opposite? Let's talk about it. Right off the bat, something we would like to make clear to you, those who might not want to give this saga a chance in the first place, just because it came across as boring from what little you may have seen from other people, or if you just want to dunk on it just because. Reading through the entire thing in one go, or without interruption from month-long intervals, it really does help the overall experience. But that should be no surprise really. Any story which you have to wait 4 weeks to continue with will certainly cause a disjointed experience. But put them together so you can read one after another, that all goes away, so already one big stumbling block is cast aside. Now when it comes to the beginning, we still stand by our initial reaction. The beginning is still very strong, we reckon. Granolah's introduction in chapter 67, which was a bridging chapter between the Moro Arc and the Granolah Arc, is still very cool. Something that we hadn't really seen much in Dragon Ball before. Having no time skips or anything like that, going right into the next arc with no delay, is quite dynamic and a statement of intent that not everything is tied up in a neat bow. As we see the remains of 7-3, a major plot point in the Moro Arc, being involved with the beginning of another character's introduction, Granolah, him doing some bounty hunting. In a way, kinda unique to Dragon Ball perhaps? But yeah, 7-3, could we actually just see what happened to him? We really need to know. Don't tell me he's just laying there rotting in a heater ship, alone. But back to Granolah. Yes, I know. With all the Star Wars bounty hunter type shows knocking around all the streaming platforms as of late, this might not seem to you as the most original premise that pulp culture can come up with. It could be seen as pretty derivative, not to mention predictable, given that Toyotaro is known to be an avid Marvel/Disney fan, and Toriyama still likes his Star Wars, so I'm sure they synergized about that particular facet of the story. But it was nevertheless a strangely compelling aspect of storytelling to bring into the Dragon Ball universe, to see a little bit of the underworld going down, and some world building. Just goes to show that not everything about the Dragon World has to have something to do with martial arts. It could be about other things too. Honestly, the first 5-6 chapters were, in our opinion, pretty fun. We got a new point of view character in the form of Granolah. We met the Heaters, rather fun characters in their own right, which thankfully expanded Frieza's own sphere of influence outside of his own little den of devilry, and it actually showed us a viable competitor for superiority. And we continued to appease the DBZ fans somewhat by having some fun training antics with the Saiyans, going down on Beerus's planet. Something which then later results in a bit of character development for Vegeta, as well as stamping out the idea that Goku has got plenty to do when it comes to Ultra Instinct. He is nowhere near close to mastering it, despite the name Mastered Ultra Instinct. We're carrying on the notion that Roshi bestowed upon Goku many decades ago. There is one thing in that segment though we can find some sense of concern with. Around chapter Noise, we had the first controversial thing pop up in the story. And trust us, it's not going to be the last controversial thing. The Cerellian Dragon Balls. As much as we love Torombo and axolotl-based dragon design, he still seems kinda overpowered for a Dragon Ball dragon. Granted, it's fascinating to see that you do not have to have 7 Dragon Balls in a set to make it work, to carry out a wish, but even then it feels a little off that It's just so easy to carry out a wish. There's not even a cooldown time for this one. If you have a radar, you could just spam wishes. And that's even if we add the monkey paw-like facet or trinket of Torombo. That is a small crumb of comfort though. Sure, you can get a powerful wish granted, but it'll cost you. It could do with a little more peril though and urgency, we think. We could step that up more. But all the same, it didn't entirely spoil the fun for us in that segment, but it's just not something we can ignore. In chapter 72, we got to the fighting. And the fighting in this arc is both the highest of highs and the lowest of lows at the same time. It's very up and down. It isn't forgettable, no, but nor is it consistently masterful. We cannot say that there are no good sequences within this saga when it comes to battles. The whole forest chase with Granolah, akin to the first Cooler movie, that's somewhat refreshing, instead of just using another bit of flat plains, or maybe a wasteland, you know? Just having some obstacles for our fighters to contend with in the middle of a fight. There's the Ultra Ego debut, which for Dragon Ball was pretty brutal, and somewhat of a tour de force for Vegeta's previous desire for conquest. We saw that deep down, the prince still had that lust for power and domination, but it was all the more complex these days, more than it used to be. Cerebral conflict was the watchword. These are moments to be remembered, especially with how cool the Vegeta-Granolah dynamic ultimately became, akin to a fighting therapist. You may recall our many times when we believed that Vegeta saw a younger version of himself in Granolah, a being driven by revenge who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted, and how it could lead to a very lonely and depressing life. Vegeta had been lucky to find Bulma and build something off of it, but Granolah wasn't looking as lucky. But in those more fighty chapters, the weaknesses of this arc became apparent. Those back and forth fights really dragged on, didn't they? Realistically, you can maybe, on the whole, cut out about 5 chapters worth of fighting from this arc and you wouldn't really lose much from the overall tone of the story. This is a symptom of modern Toyotaro. He often exhibits this. Sometimes chapters don't feel like manga chapters. They feel more like storyboards for an animated project. But this isn't an anime. Look, Toyotaro, if you want to storyboard the anime, make storyboards, okay? Don't bring that stuff into the manga. You really need to learn from Toriyama on this one. It slows things down when sequences become a little too detailed. Anime can make it work. Manga, it's kind of funny though, because the Granolah saga is only 20 chapters long. Moro was actually longer, but it didn't feel longer. It drags more than Moro's story did, which was 25 chapters long. Can you believe that? Part of this is mostly down to the fighting taking place in the same location for 16 chapters. No joke. We're on planet Cereal from chapter 71 to 87, solidly. No real changes of location. Okay, save for Goku and Gas jumping around space in 82. Yes, Moro came to Earth and stayed there, but Earth is the home of Dragon Ball, so that gets a pass. That's fine, that's the base location. Planet Cereal doesn't get that luxury. Yes, I do know that it's a staple of the series, and Toyotaro tries to give us some cool stuff in the background to make up for it, or even play with angles from time to time. But there's a lot of stalling going on here. Granolah is a little bit annoying during this segment too, but again, we'll forgive that a little in hindsight, due to this being a part of his character development and him being manipulated by the heaters. We get it now. There was a reason for it. Also, rereading the arc, it's made us realise how supportive of each other Oil and Macki truly are. They really are a cohesive pair, and that in turn made us appreciate them even more. We are glad that they survived ultimately. We just wish that they could have been maybe the ones to rebrand the Heaters as a slimmer, more svelte organisation, instead of just resorting to being lackeys in Frieza's kitchen. But I guess they got what was coming to them, really. Turns out Frieza only allowed the Heaters to operate because he felt like it. Now he doesn't feel like it. Simple as when you think about it. The Heaters were living, turns out, on borrowed time for decades. We need to talk about those flashbacks next. Those flashbacks, mostly, are what killed the saga for many. Ironically, because it had Bardock in it. Or at least it made the whole experience all the more precarious. But before we start to talk about that controversial part of the arc, just look at the little baby gas. You just want the bitches round cheeks, don't you? Baby gas, do 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 do. Baby gas, do 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 do. Okay, sorry. Anyway, Bardock will always be a controversial topic within the community, no matter what product you choose to put him in. And we think it would have been healthier had his whole interaction in this story been simplified. If only it had been that Bardock spared Muesli and Granolah out of apathy, and not being such an active part in saving them. He just saved them because, something to do. He was bored, didn't really care. It's like, alright, I'm off. He just did that. That was it. After that chapter, Granolah would never truly recover as a character. It was all about Bardock from then on in. Granolah became an afterthought. This storyline, which either should be its own thing or a B-plot or maybe a mini-arc after this one, it just hijacks the story for the last third of the saga. When you couple that with already weird pacing, it makes the whole shebang even more wonky. We've talked a lot about Bardock's portrayal in previous discussions. We don't think really he's that different from his original iteration in the special, but we know that a lot of you out there disagree. But at the end of the day, we just think that he took much of the arc away from the original mainstays, which it really worked to the detriment of the titular character. Check out our video about him here for more context. Also, by the way, he's not Granolah's dad. Toyotaro confirmed in one of the interviews that he conducted with publications in Japan about that he originally wrote the very minor character of Flake to be the father of our Cerellian, but it didn't make the cut, so that chestnut was cracked. Instead, we got Muesli, because female characters get more attention, as is the way on the internet. I can't stop it. But then Gas enters the scene as the main physical threat, just as we predicted many months ago, and is surprisingly effective. For a tool. Oh yeah, we kinda like him in his ultimate narrative journey though. Though as we've said, he will most likely be forgotten in a couple of years, but it's nice to see a main villain who has some sense of tragic irony behind him, if you think about it, and not entirely unsympathetic. We haven't had the likes of that since, Dr. Gero maybe? Zamasu, that's debatable. Oh, stop crying, you did it all to yourself! Admittedly, the teleport fight between Gas and Goku is one of the coolest fight-related moments in the saga. It just feels so cathartic too to witness, especially with us complaining about the stale locales. Not to mention it was a sign that Goku knew his place in this team, before Bardock came barging in and pulled his son back into the plot for no really viable reason. Goku wasn't feeling the fight with Gas, so instead, he chose to play a part and give the others time to regroup whilst he gave Gas the runaround. Very clever. Goku took a back seat and helped others out, instead of taking the wheel, which he actually then did later on. So it sort of negates the fight. But the hopping across space though, that was genuinely funny, and it was nice to see some old faces knock around. Then we have another moment that was needlessly stalling the plot, which was the encounter of Bardock and Gas, which honestly, this saga didn't need. Especially since the flashback wasn't really the key in defeating Gas, really. It was just a weird plot point, if anything. The only thing we got from it was Bardock, winning. Saiyan's, winning anyway. When have you ever heard of a Saiyan begging to throw a match? Raditz maybe for his own survival, but that's a freak occurrence. Yes, I admit it was kinda cool to see Bardock being battered and bruised and carrying on the fight, but it could have been conveyed in another more efficient way. I think one example I had is that during the fight with Gas and Goku later on, you have snippets of the Bardock fight, Gas recognizing it's like, I remember this. Flash, Bardock, flashback, Goku does something, flashback to Bardock, Gas gets increasingly angry and impatient. That's a really cool way to convey a similarity, and you're not really taking things out of the story. There you go, do it like that. But what was kinda nice was to see Oil and Macki losing faith in Alek, and seeing him for the scum that he was. Also, the joint victory of Goku, Vegeta and Granolah, that was a big plus, and actually kinda crucial for the overall integrity of the story. Had that not happened, and we got Goku being the one who took Gas down on his own, we would have rioted. But with all that, we get to the finale, which was divisive, but it got people's attention, and guaranteed that people will be talking about this for months. Despite there not being any manga chapters until at maybe most December. Will the zombie form Gas make him more memorable? Probably. Was Frieza an entertaining showstopper? Certainly. Was it entertaining as its own thing? Oh yeah. But there are some problems here that we need to address, which kind of make us feel like this ending was kind of slapped on at the last minute for the sake of fan service. First of all, Granolah gets no closure, no afterthought, no anything really. All we got from him was a generic, "I'm gonna fix the planet," followed by an "Okay, bye, we hope to fight you someday." But Granolah's gonna die in a couple of years, so no, Goku, you won't. There's no emotional payoff for this character's story, and it's partially down to Monaito's miraculous survival, which is seriously pushing the angelic rules. Also, how many of you noticed the Deus Ex Machina that was Monaito right at the end? It just so happened that now, he can hypnotize people right in battle, or heal effectively now, when it was needed. Now, he can do it perfectly just because he practiced it. What? At least he didn't make Torombo, though. That would have just been the last straw. That's important to remind you, folks. He is merely the custodian of Torombo, after the Saiyan attack 40 years ago. Someone made him, and Monaito took care of him. He can't likely upgrade Torombo, and he did promise to seal the Dragon Balls away, but you know what would have been better? For everyone's sake, do what Dende did in the Dragon Ball Online timeline and permanently deactivate those balls! Even if they're under lock and key, they still exist! And knowing that leaves a sour taste in some people's mouths. They could be brought back. I mean, to be fair, he is an elder and thus somewhat of a kami-like being, but still, the whole prophecy from the Oracle Fish, that's now proven to be a red herring. And according to Whis, it might not even be Frieza who's the strongest. Which kind of makes this arc, and we're sorry to say it, folks, a waste of time? If Granolah knew about Elec's involvement in Muesli's death, it would have probably ended the saga much earlier. The only thing we've got to give credit to him for was the fact that he didn't kill Elec, or anyone in this saga. He didn't break his code, despite gaining this power. He has at least some moral fibre. Then we have to discuss Black Frieza a bit. We covered it more here in this discussion, but here's the summary. Him subverting the whole saga was entertaining and partially unexpected, but really, Granolah was kind of dropped in favour of Black Frieza. You never really see Granolah reacting to Frieza's presence either. The guy who had ordered the Saiyans to strike planet Cerellian in the first place. Granolah wanted revenge against Frieza, and Frieza's right here. He's been yearning for that, and then nothing? Not even offering to help Goku and Vegeta out in some way. No! Yes, Granolah said he was done with revenge, but that's a little too apathetic. Come on. Granolah just disappears for that segment when Frieza featured. There's no acknowledgement of the form or a reaction. And sure, he's busy maybe caring for Monaito, but still, not even an panel. We're really supposed to believe that Granolah wouldn't try and help the Saiyans when Frieza attacked them? He doesn't know anything about their previous rivalry, and this is kind of banter. As far as Granolah's concerned, Frieza's attacking them for the first time. But yeah, the fact that Elec was the one to point the Saiyans and Frieza to Cereal doesn't entirely pardon Frieza from his part in the carnage that was the saga's end. Yes, Frieza didn't randomly show up at least, he was summoned there, but his conduct afterward gave the audience whiplash that will last months. It's almost like Toyotaro got bored with some of the plot threads or characters that he'd come up with, and Toriyama probably taught him that, you can just shuffle them off into the background. You know, if you don't like them, just get rid of them, just drop them. We'll just have Frieza drop-kick them into oblivion. But let's get back to the Bounty Hunter one more time. We really hope that we are going to see Granolah one more time in the future, as his Bounty Hunter self is intriguing. The Hitos were fun. Monaito was fun. It's just a shame that there are so many things that are holding down this arc, but was it terrible? No. Ultimately, it was decent. 6.5 out of 10 maybe. Maybe a little bit more. Maybe a 7. There were some really high notes, but the lowest notes, they really kept it down. We're also kind of glad that the manga is on a hiatus now at the moment. Hopefully it might be connected to a possible animated adaptation next year. It will clearly be more tame than its manga counterpart, but at the end of the day, the anime can perhaps tweak a lot of the issues that we had with both the Moro and Granolah sagas. We can't say that they don't have memorable moments that we would love to see animated. We would love to see Black Frieza's debut in the anime, and you can find out why we would like that in this video. Catch you later!